There is an island at the center of a lake at Althorp House in Northamptonshire, surrounded by trees that she loved, in an estate that has been in Spencer family hands for 500 years. That is where Diana rests. Not in a royal vault, not in a public cemetery, on Spencer land, under Spencer protection, in the keeping of her brother Charles, the 9th Earl Spencer. And that detail, which can sound purely biographical, is in fact the central structural fact of everything that follows in this story. That detail matters because it is not ceremonial, it is structural. Charles Spencer controls the physical location of his sister's burial. He controls the access to her private papers, her home videos, her handwritten correspondence. He controls who is permitted to tell the story of the woman who rests on that island, in what form and on what terms. He has held that role for nearly 30 years. And in early 2026, according to widespread reporting across royal commentary and industry media, he reportedly exercised it in a way that has sent ripples through both London and Hollywood. For years, the Sussex brand has been built on a foundation, not just the Netflix deals and the Spotify contracts and the lifestyle launches, but on something more fundamental: the proximity to Diana's story. The implication that Harry carries her legacy, and that Meghan, in some meaningful sense, continues it. That foundation just took a serious reported blow. And it came not from a palace briefing or a tabloid front page. It came from within the walls of Althorp itself. Tonight we are going through the full story: who Charles Spencer is and why his opinion carries weight that almost no other voice on this subject can match. What was reportedly proposed and what reportedly happened when Charles Spencer reviewed the project. What the pattern of Diana-adjacent branding has looked like over the past several years. And what the reported rejection means for the Sussex operation's most significant remaining content asset. Let's start with the man, because you cannot understand the significance of this moment without understanding who Charles Spencer actually is and what his position represents. He is not a peripheral figure in the Diana story. He is arguably the most important living custodian of it. He was her brother, her blood, and one of the few people who knew the private Diana rather than the global icon that the rest of the world had access to. When she died in 1997, he stood at the pulpit of Westminster Abbey in front of the royal family, the British government, and a global television audience of hundreds of millions, and he made a promise. He said that Diana's blood family would ensure her sons were raised with the soul and sensitivity she cherished, rather than the cold and hard rigidity of the monarchy. He said it looking directly at the royals seated in front of him, in Westminster Abbey, at her funeral. That speech remains one of the most discussed and debated pieces of public address in modern British history. It was not diplomatic. It was not carefully managed by a communications team. It was a direct statement, delivered to the most powerful people in the country, in the most visible possible setting, at the most emotionally charged moment of the decade. The fact that Charles Spencer chose those words, in that place, at that moment, tells you everything about how he approaches the protection of his sister's legacy. He is a man who, when he believes something important is at stake, says exactly what he thinks in exactly the most impactful setting available to him. He has been doing that since 1997. And according to multiple accounts in the reporting that has emerged from royal commentary circles in early 2026, he did it again. He is also, and this is the part that makes his role uniquely powerful in this specific context, the man who controls the physical and archival heart of the Diana story. Althorp holds private papers, handwritten diaries, home video footage, and personal effects that the public has never seen. He decides who gets access to them and under what conditions. He has turned down requests from documentary makers, biographers, and major broadcasters for decades, opening the archives selectively and with clear criteria. Every decision he makes about Diana's memory is deliberate. Nothing about Althorp is accidental. Every choice Charles Spencer makes about what is shared and what is protected has been made with conscious intention. If Palace Insider is giving you the full picture that other channels skip, go ahead and hit the like button. It genuinely helps us reach more people. Now, let's talk about what was reportedly proposed, because the context of the project matters. By early 2026, according to widespread industry reporting, the Sussex operation was in a position that required a major commercial win. The Spotify partnership had ended in a way that was widely covered and not flattering. The Netflix relationship, once a landmark deal that had been announced with considerable fanfare, had reportedly been restructured to a considerably more limited first-look arrangement. The lifestyle brand, having moved through a rebrand already, was generating commentary about overpriced candles rather than the aspirational cultural moment it was designed to produce. The cooking show had reportedly not returned for a third season. The Polo documentary had not generated the cultural footprint that was hoped for. The pattern across multiple projects had been similar. Significant initial announcement, initial public attention, followed by commercial performance that, by multiple industry accounts, fell short of what the scale of the deal that funded it had assumed. Each project had arrived as a potential breakout, and each had settled into something considerably more modest. And in the cold economics of the streaming industry, modest performance against a major upfront commitment creates a specific kind of pressure. Against that backdrop, the 30th anniversary of Diana's death in 2027 looked like the obvious answer to everyone in Montecito. A global audience would tune in. The story guaranteed the kind of attention that cooking shows and lifestyle content could never command. Harry, as Diana's son, present for her death, shaped by her absence, would give the project an authenticity that no other documentary could claim. Netflix executives, by multiple accounts in the reporting, were interested in a major multi-episode project to mark the anniversary. But the reported proposal was not simply a son's tribute to his mother. According to the accounts that have circulated in royal commentary and industry reporting, the project was designed to draw a direct and explicit line between Diana's experiences inside the royal family and Meghan's experiences inside the royal family. Diana as the original, Meghan as the continuation. The structure was built around the argument that the same institution, the same hostile press, and the same patterns of being unsupported and undermined had shaped both women's experiences. That framing required Charles Spencer's cooperation, not just his passive consent, but his active and visible participation. The golden ticket was Althorp, the house, the archives, the island, and Charles Spencer himself sitting on camera and endorsing the comparison. His involvement would have told the global audience that Diana's own blood family believed the parallel being drawn was legitimate. Without it, the project was two people making claims about a woman who cannot respond over the quiet but visible absence of the person most qualified to validate or reject those claims. Charles Spencer reportedly looked at the proposal, saw the framing, saw Meghan's name positioned as the modern spiritual heir to his sister's struggle, and his response, by multiple accounts that have since circulated through royal commentary, was 4 words: "Is this a joke?" Subscribe to Palace Insider and drop a comment below. Were you surprised by Charles Spencer's reported reaction? Now let's talk about why that reaction may have been building for years, because this did not come from nowhere. The 4-word response was not a snap judgment from a man who had never considered the question. It was reportedly the conclusion of someone who had been watching a specific pattern for years and had already formed a clear view about what it represented. Charles Spencer is not someone who forms views quickly and changes them easily. His public record across 3 decades suggests the opposite. A man who observes, forms a view over time, and then acts with precision when he decides the moment requires it. The 1997 eulogy was not delivered by a man who had not thought carefully about every word. His subsequent decisions about the Althorp archives have each been deliberate. When he reportedly responded to the Netflix proposal with 4 words, that was almost certainly not his first engagement with the question it was raising. It was the most visible and most public moment of an ongoing process of observation and judgment that had been running for considerably longer. Royal commentators and Spencer family observers have tracked what they have taken to calling Diana cosplay, not a term designed to dismiss the tribute impulse, but to describe a pattern that critics argue has gone considerably beyond tribute into something more systematic. It started with the aquamarine ring at the evening reception after the 2018 royal wedding, a ring that had belonged to Diana. In isolation, that was a genuine and understandable choice. Harry, including his mother in his wedding day, was received warmly and broadly. But the pattern continued beyond that specific moment. The Cartier tank watch, the butterfly earrings, the gold bracelets, items that were not merely pieces of jewelry with a passing resemblance to Diana's taste, but specific and identifiable icons of Diana's personal visual identity, pieces associated with her in photographs and public memory, worn at high-profile moments where cameras would be present and the association would be captured and circulated. Critics began noting that the cumulative effect was different from individual tribute. Individual tributes honor a specific moment or a specific connection. a sustained procession of Diana-associated items, worn at high-visibility public appearances over a period of several years, creates a different kind of visual narrative, one that places the wearer inside Diana's aesthetic consistently, rather than occasionally. It consistently places the wearer inside Diana's aesthetic in a way that invites a particular kind of audience reading. The storytelling dimension followed the same trajectory. The 2021 Oprah interview has been compared extensively, in structure and in emotional register, to Diana's own 1995 Panorama interview. Both involved a woman in a high-profile one-on-one interview format, discussing feeling unsupported and silenced inside the royal family, having mental health concerns dismissed by the institution, and navigating a hostile British press. The structural parallels were noted immediately in the press coverage and in commentary, and have been discussed at length in the years since, including by people who were broadly sympathetic to Meghan's account of her experience. For Charles Spencer, the Panorama interview carries a specific weight that it does not carry for most people. He has spoken publicly about his grief and guilt regarding the circumstances in which that interview came about, circumstances he has described as involving manipulation and the exploitation of his sister's vulnerability. He has lived with that specific weight for nearly 30 years. For him, watching a structurally similar interview being described in some quarters as Diana's spiritual successor was not, reportedly, the tribute that framing was intended to convey. By 2025 and into 2026, the parallel was becoming more explicit in the coverage and in the imagery. Professional photography shoots drew direct visual comparisons to Diana's most recognized portraits. The framing of the Sussex story as a woman fighting a hostile institution was increasingly presented in terms that invited the Diana parallel without requiring it to be stated directly. The audience was being guided toward the comparison rather than having it made explicit. Charles Spencer, watching this accumulation of choices from Althorp over a period of years, would have been forming a view long before the Netflix proposal arrived. The proposal did not create his position. It asked him to officially endorse one. Now let's talk about what this rejection means practically, because the strategic implications are considerable and worth understanding clearly. The 2027 anniversary project was, by multiple accounts in industry reporting, the Sussex operation's most substantial remaining content asset in the pipeline. Diana's story generates global audience attention in a way that cooking shows and polo documentaries structurally cannot. The 30th anniversary was a genuine cultural moment with a built-in audience that no amount of marketing could replicate, and Harry's participation would have given the project a legitimacy that no competitor documentary could match. Without Charles Spencer's cooperation, the project changes fundamentally in character. A documentary about Diana built on Spencer family archives, endorsed by Diana's own blood family, and featuring the participation of the Earl who has been her guardian for 3 decades. That is a prestige project. It carries the weight of family sanction. It tells the global audience that the people closest to Diana believe the story being told is true and honorable. A documentary about Diana, built on publicly available footage and the testimony of Harry and Meghan, produced over the active and publicly known objection of the Spencer family, is a different kind of project entirely. It does not carry family sanction. It carries the opposite, the implicit message that the family does not endorse what is being said or the framing in which it is being said. In the documentary world, that difference is not marginal. It is the difference between a project that awards shows discuss and a project that is categorized differently. There is also the question of what the archives represent beyond prestige. Charles Spencer controls private materials, handwritten diaries, home video footage, personal correspondence that have never been made public. Those materials were reportedly a central element of what the Netflix proposal was seeking. New and genuinely unseen material from Diana herself would have transformed the project from a well-produced tribute into something the audience would feel genuinely compelled to see. Without those materials, the project works from the same publicly available footage that every other Diana documentary has drawn on for 3 decades, which is a significantly different and significantly less compelling proposition. By declining, Charles Spencer has also protected something that cannot be recovered once it is lost. Once private materials are digitized and distributed globally, the privacy they represented is gone. Diana's handwriting is on public record forever. Her voice in an unguarded home video becomes content. The last genuinely private pieces of who she was as a person, rather than as an icon, are converted into background footage for a streaming platform. Charles Spencer's refusal preserves those pieces in the only way they can be preserved, by keeping them where they are, unseen on the island at Althorp. In Hollywood, the perception that a project is operating without family endorsement, and specifically against the publicly known position of the relevant family, carries real commercial consequences. Talent assesses risk before attaching. Brand partners assess alignment. The Spencer family's reported position does not make the project illegal or impossible. It makes it a different kind of project, with a different risk profile, attracting different conversations about whether the people involved have the standing to make the claims they are making. There is one more dimension to this story that is worth examining because multiple royal commentators have raised it, and it adds a layer to what the Spencer reported decision represents strategically. Charles Spencer and Prince William have, by multiple accounts, a closer relationship than the public visibility of that connection might suggest. William is famously protective of his mother's image and memory. That has been a consistent element of how he has conducted his public life since her death, and it has been documented extensively in royal reporting over 2 decades. For William, the question of how Diana's story is told and by whom is not an abstract one. William has no formal mechanism to block a Sussex content project about his mother. He cannot issue an injunction on a family member's documentary. He cannot prevent Harry from discussing Diana's memory publicly. What he can do is maintain his own relationship with the people who do have that power, the Spencer family, and ensure that those relationships are strong enough that the Spencers feel supported in making their own independent decisions. Whether a direct conversation between William and Charles Spencer specifically preceded the reported rejection, no reporting has confirmed that. But the alignment of interests between the two is visible. William wants Diana's memory protected from what he reportedly views as commercial exploitation, and Charles Spencer, by his reported response to the Netflix proposal, appears to hold a similar view. When two people share the same concern and are in regular contact, it does not require explicit coordination to arrive at the same conclusion independently. And independently is exactly how both of their positions can be described. What that alignment means practically is that the Sussex operation faces a reported obstacle it cannot resolve through the usual tools available to it. It cannot brief its way around Charles Spencer's position. It cannot run a press strategy that neutralizes a forward response from the man who controls Althorp. It cannot describe the Spencer family's reported concerns as institutional hostility because the Spencer family is not an institution. It is Diana's blood family. And in the specific context of a project about Diana's life and legacy, the Blood family's reported view carries a weight that is very difficult to contest publicly without creating a problem considerably larger than the one being contested. For Harry specifically, the geometry of this situation is uncomfortable in a very specific way. The 1997 speech at Westminster Abbey was not made about the institution. It was made about Harry. The promise Charles Spencer made was a promise made to and for Harry. By reportedly blocking a project that Harry was involved in, Charles Spencer is not acting as an adversary. He is acting as someone who believes he is keeping a 30-year-old promise. Whether Harry experiences it that way is another question, but it is very difficult to publicly frame as an attack. There is also a wider industry signal worth noting, because the commercial dimension of this does not end with the Netflix project itself. In Hollywood, and in the global media industry more broadly, the perception that a project is operating without family endorsement carries real consequences that ripple outward from the specific project to the wider brand. Talent assesses risk before attaching their names. Brand partners assess alignment before signing agreements. Investors assess the sustainability of a content operation before committing capital. When the brother of the woman at the center of a project has reportedly described that project as a joke, the risk calculation for everyone else connected to the Sussex content operation changes, not just for the Diana documentary, but for the brand overall. The Spencer veto is a data point about what kind of story the Sussex brand is now telling in the market, and it is not a flattering one. The silence at Althorp is back, and this time, Charles Spencer is the one who chose to keep it. What remains, and what the coming months will test, is whether the Sussex operation has a significant content strategy that does not depend on the Diana parallel. The 5 years since 2020 have demonstrated that lifestyle content, cooking shows, and polo documentaries do not generate the audience numbers that justify the scale of deal the original Netflix partnership represented. The Diana anniversary was the card that was supposed to change that equation. Without Charles Spencer's endorsement, that card has been significantly weakened, not eliminated entirely, but fundamentally changed in character in ways that directly affect its commercial value and prestige positioning. A Diana documentary produced with Spencer family participation is a prestige event. A Diana documentary produced without it, and in the context of reported Spencer family opposition, is a different kind of project with a different risk profile. Whether Netflix proceeds on those terms and what the project looks like if they do are questions that the industry will be watching. But the deeper question, whether the Sussex brand has a durable content strategy that stands on its own without the Diana connection as its foundation, is one that the reported Althorp rejection has now placed very visibly at the center of the conversation. Because if the answer is no, the implications go considerably beyond a single documentary. The island at Althorp and the silence around it remains in Spencer hands. The promise made at Westminster Abbey in 1997 remains the framework through which Charles Spencer appears to be making his decisions, and the 4 words he reportedly used to describe what was proposed, "Is this a joke?" have now entered the public conversation about the Sussex brand in a way that no amount of press strategy is going to easily remove. The silence at Althorp is back, and this time, Charles Spencer is the one who has chosen to keep it, and chosen it with the same precision and the same deliberateness that has characterized every decision he has made about his sister's memory since 1997. Whether the Sussex operation finds another way to mark the 2027 anniversary, a version of the project that does not require Spencer cooperation, built on publicly available material and Harry's own testimony, remains to be seen. But it will be a different project in character from the one that was reportedly envisioned, and in the prestige documentary space, character is everything. The project that gets made without the island at Althorp will always be defined, at least partly, by the fact that the island at Althorp chose not to be part of it. That absence will follow it everywhere. It will be in every review, every discussion, every comparison with what the project could have been. The 4 words Charles Spencer reportedly said will be in the footnotes of every piece written about whatever the Sussex operation produces in 2027. That is the specific and lasting weight of a rejection from the person who controls the gates. The gates of Althorp are reportedly closed. Was Charles Spencer right to close them? Or should Harry have been trusted to tell his own mother's story, in his own words, without his uncle's permission? Leave your take in the comments, hit subscribe so you never miss the next one. And if this gave you something to think about, the like button is right there. See you in the next one.